Alex had always been fascinated by the stars. As a child, he would lay in the grass at night, gazing up at the vast expanse of the sky, wondering if there was life beyond Earth. His love for space and the unknown grew over the years, and by the time he was in his 20s, he was determined to unravel its mysteries. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex found himself once again in his small, cluttered room, surrounded by old gadgets and technology he had collected over the years. He had an old communication device that he had found in his grandfather's attic, tucked away in a dusty box. The device was nothing like the modern tech Alex was used to. It had buttons that seemed to have no clear purpose, and the screen flickered with strange symbols. His grandfather, who had passed away a few years ago, had always told him stories about his adventures and mysterious encounters when he was younger. One of those stories involved a strange device, much like the one Alex had found, but it was hard to tell whether the stories were true or just fantastical tales to amuse him. But now, sitting at his desk, Alex was determined to figure it out. After weeks of tinkering, he had finally gotten the device to power on. His fingers hesitated over the buttons for a moment, the excitement and uncertainty building inside him. What if this was more than just an antique? What if it was a tool, a connection to something greater? He didn't know, but he was about to find out. With a few experimental presses of the buttons, Alex activated the device. The screen blinked to life, displaying a series of unfamiliar symbols that danced across the screen like a code. For a moment, he stared, confused. He had no idea what it meant, but something deep inside him told him to keep going. So he did. He adjusted the frequency, pressing a few more buttons in rapid succession, unaware of the consequences of his actions. At first, nothing happened. The screen remained static for a few seconds before flickering again. Then a low hum filled the room, almost imperceptible but steadily growing louder. The hairs on the back of Alex's neck stood up. Something was happening. The device's screen flashed brighter and brighter, sending a strange light across the room, illuminating the walls in eerie hues of green and purple. The humming grew louder, vibrating the air around him. Alex glanced nervously at the device, but his curiosity overwhelmed any fear he might have had. Suddenly, a burst of energy shot from the device, traveling up to the ceiling in a blinding beam. Alex recoiled, his heart racing, but it was over in a split second. The room fell silent once more. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the device, now dark and still in his hands. Had it really just happened? Had he really just sent something into space? Confused, Alex sat in stunned silence. Was that a signal? He wondered. Was it even possible? The idea seemed absurd. He had no intention of contacting anyone, let alone anyone from another world, but the device seemed to have its own plan. Alex didn't know it yet, but that simple action, that moment of curiosity, had set into motion events far beyond his understanding. A signal had been sent, not to a satellite or a distant corner of the Earth, but to the far reaches of space, reaching out to something, or someone, beyond his wildest imagination. Unaware of the significance of what he had just done, Alex put the device down on his desk and walked over to the window. The night sky stretched out before him, peaceful and serene, with no hint of the chaos his actions had just unleashed. He could hear the gentle rustle of the wind outside and the distant hum of the city, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. For a moment, Alex tried to push the strange events from his mind, thinking perhaps it had all been a trick of the light. But as he turned back to his desk, something caught his eye. The device was blinking again, a soft red light pulsing from its surface. It was as though it had come to life on its own. Confused and intrigued, Alex reached for it once more, his fingers trembling slightly. What had he done? What was happening? Before he could press another button or attempt to shut it down, the device emitted a soft electronic voice, unfamiliar but unmistakable. "I am coming for you, human." The words hung in the air, chilling him to his core. His heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He looked at the device again, his pulse racing. What was this? Was someone playing a joke on him? Or had he just opened a door to something he could never close again? Alex couldn't begin to understand what had just happened. But one thing was certain. His life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The morning after the strange encounter with the device, Alex couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. He went about his usual routine, making coffee, scrolling through his phone, and checking his emails, but nothing felt normal. His mind kept replaying the words the device had spoken to him. "I am coming for you, human." He couldn't understand what it meant, or if it even meant anything at all. Was it some sort of glitch in the technology? A message from some distant radio station? It seemed absurd to even consider the possibility of it being something real. But deep down, something inside him told him that it wasn't just a coincidence. The strange pulse of energy, the bizarre message, it had to mean something. Still, he tried to dismiss it. He told himself that it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. There had to be a reasonable explanation for everything. He sat back down at his desk, the device still sitting there on his cluttered workspace, silent and inert. His fingers hovered over it, uncertain. Should he try to turn it on again? Should he investigate further, or was it better to just let it go? As if on cue, the device began to hum softly, a faint vibration in the air that Alex could feel in his fingertips. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The screen flickered to life again, the same strange symbols appearing before his eyes, flashing in rapid succession. For a moment, Alex considered shutting it off, but something within him urged him not to. It was as though the device was calling to him, pulling him toward something far beyond his understanding. Before he could make up his mind, a sudden flash of light erupted from the screen, blinding him momentarily. The light was bright, almost otherworldly, and the air around him seemed to crackle with static. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the light vanished, leaving behind only a sense of intense anticipation. The screen went dark once more, but the hum didn't stop. It continued, now louder, more insistent. Alex's breath quickened, and he leaned in closer, his eyes wide with both fear and fascination. What was happening? Without warning, a sharp, cold voice broke through the air, clear and direct. "Human, I have received your signal. I am coming." The words echoed in the room, sending a chill down Alex's spine. The voice was different this time, more powerful, more confident. It wasn't just a mechanical sound anymore. It was as though someone, or something, was speaking directly to him from far away. His mind raced, and his pulse thudded in his ears. Who was this? What did they want? How could a device from his grandfather's attic be connected to anything like this? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do now? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, sharp noise from outside the window. Alex jerked his head toward the sound, his heart skipping a beat. He didn't know what he expected to see, but it certainly wasn't what happened next. The sky was different, strange clouds swirling above, casting shadows across the city. The air seemed to vibrate with an energy that was not of this world. Alex rushed to the window, staring out into the horizon, but all he could see was the faint glow of something far beyond the clouds, something that didn't belong. His breath caught in his throat as the ground beneath him trembled. At first, it was a soft shake, like a distant thunderstorm, but then it grew stronger, more pronounced. Alex grabbed the edge of the windowsill to steady himself, his mind spinning with confusion. What was going on? Was this part of the message? Was it a sign? A strange sound filled the air, like a low rumble mixed with a humming noise. It seemed to be coming from the sky itself. He looked up again, and that's when he saw it. A faint, shimmering light cutting through the clouds, growing brighter by the second. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a helicopter. This was something else. His heart raced. panic creeping in as he realized that what he had done, whatever it was, had set something into motion that he couldn't control. The light continued to grow until it was almost blinding. Alex's hands shook as he backed away from the window, his mind reeling. He didn't know whether to run or stay. Was this some sort of strange weather event? A military experiment? No, deep down, Alex knew that wasn't it. This was something else, something far beyond his comprehension. The light suddenly exploded in a burst of energy, and Alex felt the room shake violently. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The ground beneath him vibrated, and he could hear the screeching of metal in the distance. He rushed to the door, throwing it open, and stepped outside into the street. The entire city seemed to be affected by the strange occurrence. People standing outside, looking up in awe and fear, but none of them knew what was happening, not like Alex did. And then, in a moment of sheer terror, he saw it, a ship descending from the sky. It was massive, unlike anything he had ever seen before, sleek and metallic, with glowing lights on its surface. It hovered above the ground, a force of pure power and alien technology. The wind whipped around him as the ship descended slowly, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Alex stood frozen, his mind unable to process what was happening. He felt as though the world had tilted off its axis, and everything was moving in slow motion. The ship landed with a soft thud, the energy dissipating as it settled. The humming sound that had filled the air died down, replaced by an eerie silence. And then, the door to the ship opened. Alex's heart stopped as he saw her, a tall, imposing figure, clad in dark armor. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, her movements precise and graceful as she stepped down from the ship. She was unlike anything Alex had ever seen, her presence both terrifying and captivating. She was a warrior, and her gaze was locked onto him. "I have come for you, human," she said, her voice cold, but with an underlying power that sent a shiver down his spine. Alex's world spun, and in that moment, he realized the truth. The signal he had sent wasn't a mistake. It had been a summons, and the one who had answered it was not of this world. Alex stood frozen as the figure before him stepped off the alien ship. His heart raced in his chest, each beat sounding like a drum in his ears. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. This wasn't some elaborate hoax, nor was it some kind of mistake. This was real. An alien warrior, tall and imposing, dressed in sleek, dark armor that shimmered with strange energy. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, their piercing intensity fixed on him, as if she could see into the very depths of his soul. For a moment, Alex wondered if he had somehow fallen into a dream, if he had somehow slipped into some parallel world where everything made sense, except for the one thing that didn't. Her. She was no human. "I have come for you, human," her voice rang out, deep and commanding. Her words were not just a declaration. They were a certainty, as if they had been written in the stars, as if they were a prophecy long foretold. Her gaze held him, unblinking, the intensity of it almost too much to bear. Alex's mouth went dry. His mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. How could this be real? This was impossible. A ship, an alien warrior. It couldn't be real. It didn't make sense. Everything Alex had known about the world, about the universe, had been turned upside down in an instant. Who are you?" he managed to stammer, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and awe. He could barely find the words to speak, but the question was simple enough. He had to understand. He had to know what was happening. "I am Xalira," she said, her voice calm yet laced with authority. "And I have been summoned by your signal." Her tone was like steel, unyielding, and yet there was something almost mesmerizing about it. Alex couldn't look away, even if he wanted to. "I come from a distant world, far from here, a place you could never imagine in your wildest dreams." Xalira's words seemed to echo in the stillness of the air around them. Her presence was overwhelming, and Alex felt small in her shadow. She was a being of power and strength, a warrior in every sense of the word. He had never seen anything like her before. She didn't belong to Earth. She was something else entirely. And yet, somehow, she was standing before him. The silence between them stretched on, filled with the unspoken weight of her presence. Alex swallowed hard, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions racing through his mind. "I didn't mean to," he said quickly, his voice rising with a mix of confusion and regret. "I didn't mean to send any signal. I was just messing around with this old thing. I didn't think it would." "Your actions have consequences, human," Xalira interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. There was no anger in her words, only a sense of inevitability, as though what was happening had been set into motion long before Alex had even known it. "What you have done is far more than you can comprehend. You have called me here, and now I must fulfill my purpose." Alex felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What did she mean by purpose? Was this some kind of cosmic joke, or was he in over his head? His mind was a jumbled mess of questions, none of which had answers. "You must come with me," Xalira continued, stepping closer. "You have no choice. The signal has bound you to me. It is your fate." "Fate?" Alex repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't even know you. How can you say this is my fate?" "You do not understand yet, but you will," she replied, her tone softening just slightly. She didn't seem to be threatening him, not in the way he might have expected. Instead, there was something almost calm in the way she spoke, as if she believed in the inevitable nature of the situation. "You are part of something much bigger than yourself, human. Your family, your bloodline. They have a history with mine, a history you have yet to uncover." Alex's mind reeled. Family? Bloodline? What could she possibly mean by that? He was just a regular guy, living a regular life, except for the fact that he had somehow summoned an alien warrior to Earth. Nothing in his life had prepared him for this. He wanted to run, to escape from the situation, but he couldn't move. His feet felt rooted to the ground, as if some invisible force was holding him in place. Xalira's gaze softened for a brief moment, her eyes flickering with something like understanding, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by the steely resolve he had seen from the beginning. "You may not know it yet, but you are the one chosen. Your family made a pact with my ancestors centuries ago. It was a promise, and now it must be fulfilled." Alex shook his head in confusion. "I don't know anything about that. My family never talked about anything like that." Xalira's eyes narrowed, a flicker of what seemed like both curiosity and frustration passing through her expression. "You do not remember, but your grandfather knew. He was part of a pact made between our people and his. When the time came, a human would be chosen to join us. That human was you." I don't even know what you're talking about." Alex felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. His mind was struggling to catch up with everything she was saying, but it felt like it was moving too fast. "I don't even know who you are. How could this be real?" Xalira took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as if trying to calm herself. She stepped forward again, this time closer, until Alex could feel the weight of her presence pressing against him. "I am the one who has come to take you, human. I will bring you back to my world. You will fulfill your role, and together, we will ensure the survival of our people." Alex opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was paralyzed by the weight of the situation, by the enormity of what he was being told. He had always dreamt of adventure, of something beyond the mundane life he had known. But this was far beyond anything he could have ever imagined. Xalira's gaze softened again, just for a moment. "This is not a choice, Alex," she said, her voice low and steady. "You are bound to me now. There is no turning back." For the first time since she had appeared, Alex felt the full weight of her words. He wasn't just involved in some random event. He was a part of something much larger, something dangerous, something destined. And whether he liked it or not, his life would never be the same again. Alex's head spun as Xalira's words sank into him, each one heavier than the last. His mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of everything that had just been thrust upon him. A promise made centuries ago. A pact between his grandfather and an alien race. None of it felt real. It was as if he had stepped into a dream, one that had taken on a life of its own, dragging him deeper into a world of questions he couldn't answer. "Wait," Alex managed to stammer, stepping back slowly, his mind still struggling to catch up. "I still don't get it. My grandfather, a pact? What does that have to do with me? I'm just a regular guy." Xalira didn't seem to be offended by his confusion. Instead, her expression softened just a fraction, as though she were preparing herself to explain something she had said 100 times before. But there was something else in her eyes, something deeper, a kind of sorrow that Alex couldn't quite place. "Your grandfather was part of a treaty, Alex," she said, her voice steady but carrying an underlying weight. "A treaty made long ago between our people and yours. A promise that when the time came, a human would be chosen to join us, to unite our worlds. Your grandfather, he was the one who started it all. You may not remember, but your bloodline is tied to mine, and you were chosen even before you were born." Alex shook his head, his thoughts crashing together in a confusing mess. His grandfather, the man who had always been so secretive, the one who had told stories of strange encounters, but never spoke of any of it to the family. Could it really be true? Was it possible that his grandfather had been involved in something like this? He ran a hand through his hair, trying to ground himself. "But how was I supposed to know any of this? I don't even remember hearing anything about it growing up. Why would my grandfather keep something like that from me?" Xalira's gaze grew distant for a moment, and when she spoke again, there was a quiet understanding in her tone. "Not everything is meant to be remembered, Alex. Some things are hidden for a reason. Your grandfather knew that this day would come, that the time would come for the signal to be sent, and for the chosen one to emerge. But he kept it hidden from you because he feared this moment. He knew that the bond between our worlds would not be an easy one." A chill ran down Alex's spine. He felt as though he were caught in a web that had been spun long before his birth, and now that it was tightening around him. There was no way to escape. He wanted to deny it, to tell her that she was wrong, that none of this made any sense. But deep down, he knew the truth. The signal had been sent, by him, unintentionally. And now he was standing face to face with the consequences of his actions. "Wait," he said again, his voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. "You said, our worlds. You mean Earth, and wherever you're from." His mind was still reeling, trying to connect the dots. "But why me? Why did it have to be me?" Xalira's eyes locked with his, and for the first time since she had arrived, Alex saw something different in her expression, something like vulnerability. "It is because of your bloodline," she said softly. "Your grandfather was not just any man. He had a role to play, a role that he passed on to you. You are the descendant of a long line of people who were meant to bridge the gap between our worlds. You were born to fulfill this promise, and now that you have unknowingly activated the signal, your fate has been sealed." Alex felt a lump rise in his throat. He had always felt different, like there was something more to his life than just the ordinary routine of his days. But this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Was he really the one meant to unite their worlds? How could someone as unremarkable as him be chosen for something so grand, so dangerous? He looked at Xalira, his confusion turning into anger. "You can't just show up and tell me that my whole life has been leading up to this. I didn't ask for any of this." Xalira remained silent for a long moment, her gaze unwavering as she studied him. "I know this is difficult for you," she said quietly, her voice softening. "But you must understand, this is not just about you. This is about the survival of my people, of our entire civilization. The war is coming, and without you, we will not survive. The signal you sent was not just a call. It was a beacon. It reached far beyond your world, into the depths of space. There are forces, dark, powerful forces, that have been watching us for centuries. They know of the treaty, and they will stop at nothing to destroy it. To destroy us. Alex's stomach twisted in knots. He had thought he was just some guy messing around with a piece of old tech, something that had no purpose other than to satisfy his curiosity. But now he was being told that his actions had set off a chain of events that could mean the end of everything. The weight of it was suffocating. You're saying that because of this signal, my life is now tied to your war. Alex's voice was shaking, a mix of anger and fear bubbling inside him. I'm just supposed to accept that. What if I don't want to fight some war I don't understand? Xalira's expression hardened, her jaw tightening, as if she were bracing herself for what she had to say next. I did not choose this for you, Alex. I did not choose for you to be a part of this war, nor did I choose for you to be dragged into it. But you are part of it now. There is no turning back. You must come with me to my world, where you will learn what is needed to fight and survive. If you refuse, if you try to run, the forces hunting us will destroy Earth along with everything you've ever known. The gravity of her words settled on him like a heavy weight, pushing down on him until he could hardly breathe. His mind raced, every thought colliding into the next. Could he really leave everything behind? Could he really fight in some war that he didn't understand, alongside an alien warrior who seemed to know more about his life than he did? And yet, as he stood there, looking at Xalira, he realized that he didn't have a choice. Whatever had been set into motion could not be stopped. His fate, his bloodline, everything was already in motion. With a deep breath, Alex nodded slowly. Okay, he whispered, more to himself than to her. I'll go with you. Xalira's eyes softened just slightly, a flicker of something almost like gratitude in her gaze. You will not regret this, she said, her voice steady but filled with an unspoken promise. Together, we will ensure the survival of both our worlds. Alex wasn't so sure, but as he followed her toward the ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had known, everything he had ever believed, was about to be irrevocably changed. Alex stepped into the spaceship with a sense of disbelief still gnawing at him. Everything felt unreal, like he was moving through a dream from which he couldn't wake up. The outside world, the life he had known, was fading behind him as the metallic door of the ship sealed with a hiss. Inside, the air was cool, and the lighting was soft yet intense, casting a strange glow across the sleek interior of the ship. He couldn't help but look around in awe as the walls seemed to shift and hum with quiet energy. The entire craft felt alive in a way that made his skin prickle, as if it were a living organism rather than a piece of technology. Xalira walked ahead of him with purpose, her posture rigid and confident, as though she had walked these corridors 1,000 times before. She moved with the grace of a predator, her armor catching the light in strange ways as if it too was part of something far beyond Alex's comprehension. He tried to keep his thoughts focused, but his mind kept spinning with the enormity of everything that had happened. When he had agreed to come with her, he had been driven by something between fear and curiosity. He had no idea what awaited him, what was expected of him. All he knew was that his life had been changed in ways he couldn't possibly have imagined, and now he was stepping into the heart of something that could very well tear his world apart. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He wasn't just the confused guy who had sent a signal into space by accident. Now he was part of something bigger, something dangerous. Xalira led him through the narrow halls, and they passed rooms filled with strange equipment, none of which Alex recognized. He couldn't even begin to guess what purpose they served, but he didn't ask. Part of him wanted to understand it all, to unravel the mystery, but he didn't think he was ready to know everything just yet. It felt like too much to absorb in one sitting. Finally, they came to a large chamber at the center of the ship. The walls here were covered in intricate markings, symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. There was a large circular platform in the middle of the room, surrounded by intricate machinery that buzzed quietly, as if in anticipation. The air was thick with an energy Alex couldn't quite place, an electric tension that made his hair stand on end. Xalira stopped at the center of the platform, turning to face him. "This is where it begins," she said quietly, her voice almost reverent. "Here, you will learn what it means to stand beside us. Here, you will be trained to fight, to survive. The war is coming, Alex. It's already begun, and you must be ready." Alex's throat tightened at the mention of the war. The weight of her words pressed down on him, and for the first time since he had entered the ship, he felt the full magnitude of what was being asked of him. He was no longer a passive participant in this strange encounter. He was being thrust into the heart of a conflict he didn't understand, surrounded by enemies he couldn't yet fathom. Xalira seemed to sense his hesitation. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel as though she could see right through him. "I know this is hard for you, Alex, but you must trust me. I will train you, and I will protect you. You are not alone in this. Not anymore." Her words were calm, but there was something in her tone that made him believe she meant it. She was a warrior, and she wasn't used to relying on others, but she was willing to for him. And despite the fear and confusion churning in his gut, Alex felt something stir within him, a spark of determination, however faint. He had been thrust into this situation against his will, but he wasn't going to let it break him. He wasn't going to let fear control him. "I don't even know how to fight," Alex said, his voice hoarse, trying to voice the concerns that had been building inside him. "I'm not like you. I don't have your strength, your training. I'm just a guy who likes space and dreams of adventure." Xalira studied him for a moment, her gaze unreadable, before she nodded slowly. "You don't need to be like me. You are human, and that is your greatest strength. You will learn. You will adapt. But you must believe in yourself, Alex. The enemy we face is not just a threat to our people, it is a threat to everything. The very fabric of existence is at risk." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. The enemy was powerful, she had made that clear. And Alex was no soldier. He was just a regular person who had never imagined his life would veer into the unknown like this. He had always been the kind of person who kept his feet on the ground, who lived for the simple joys of everyday life. But now, standing in the heart of an alien ship, staring down a future that seemed increasingly uncertain, Alex realized that the simplicity of his former life was gone. Xalira stepped back, gesturing for him to approach the circular platform. "This is where we will begin. This is where you will learn the ways of our people. The training will not be easy, but you must trust the process. You must trust me." Despite the anxiety swirling in his chest, Alex walked toward the platform. As he stepped onto the smooth surface, he felt a strange vibration beneath his feet, like the platform was alive. It wasn't cold, though it had a sharp metallic quality to it. He stood there for a moment, his heart pounding as the room seemed to pulse with energy. He wasn't sure what was about to happen, but a part of him was willing to face whatever came next. Suddenly, the room began to shift. The walls seemed to ripple, and the markings on them began to glow brighter, casting an eerie light over the chamber. The platform beneath Alex's feet hummed louder, its energy building with every passing second. He felt an odd sensation in his chest, a deep pull that made his body vibrate with the force of it. His vision blurred, the room around him seeming to twist and distort. "Focus, Alex." Xalira's voice broke through the haze in his mind. "Focus on the connection. Let the energy flow through you. Let it guide you." He didn't know what she meant, but something deep inside him told him to trust her. He closed his eyes and concentrated, willing himself to feel the power around him, to become one with it. The vibrations intensified, and for a moment, Alex felt something stir within him. Something primal, something that called out to him in a way he couldn't explain. The sensation overwhelmed him, and suddenly he was flooded with images, flashes of strange battles, fierce warriors, and distant worlds beyond his comprehension. He saw himself fighting, standing side by side with Xalira and others like her. He saw himself in a new role, not just as a bystander, but as a key player in a war that spanned the universe. The images were blurry and fragmented, but the sense of power, the sense of destiny, was undeniable. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, and Alex staggered slightly, disoriented. His breathing was shallow, and his heart raced. What had just happened? What had he seen? Xalira was standing in front of him again, her expression unreadable. "That is the beginning, Alex. That is your training. You will see more. You will understand more. But you must remain focused. You must be ready." Alex nodded, his head spinning. He had seen something important. And for the first time, he realized that he was no longer just a spectator. He was part of this world now. A world of power, of danger, and of a war that was already upon them. And there was no turning back. The days aboard the ship blurred together for Alex. Each one felt like an eternity, yet they passed in a haze of training, discovery, and confusion. The ship had become his new world, its sleek walls and hum of advanced technology now as familiar as the streets he had once walked back on Earth. But no matter how much he tried to adapt, to make sense of it all, the weight of his situation hung over him like a storm cloud, always present, never letting him forget that his life had changed forever. Xalira was an ever-present figure in his training, a stern and demanding mentor who pushed him harder than he ever thought he could go. At first, he had resisted, telling himself that he wasn't cut out for this kind of life, that there was no way he could become the warrior she wanted him to be. But she had been relentless. There was something in her eyes, something that made him feel like this was his only option, like he had no choice but to learn, to survive. And despite the doubts, despite the fear and uncertainty, a small part of him began to listen to her, to understand that he wasn't just training to fight. He was training to protect everything he had ever known. The physical training was grueling. Xalira taught him combat techniques that were unlike anything Alex had ever seen. She showed him how to wield strange, energy-based weapons that hummed with a power he couldn't fully comprehend. The ship's training room was a sterile, metallic space, but the air within it crackled with intensity, as if the room itself was a battleground waiting for a war. At first, Alex fumbled through each lesson, his movements clumsy and unsure. He was a quick learner, but the gap between where he was and where he needed to be seemed insurmountable. Each failure stung, and the frustration built up inside him, threatening to break him down. But Xalira was patient. She never stopped pushing him, never stopped guiding him. Her harsh words were always tempered with a quiet understanding, a knowing that Alex couldn't yet grasp. Every time he fell, she was there to help him rise again. And slowly, something within him began to change. He started to feel the weight of the weapons, the hum of the energy flowing through him as if it were an extension of his own body. He wasn't just holding a weapon anymore. He was becoming one with it. The combat moves that had once felt impossible now began to flow more naturally, his body responding almost instinctively to the rhythm of battle. But it wasn't just the physical training that was testing him. It was the mental and emotional toll of it all. Every day, Xalira pushed him further, trying to break through the layers of self-doubt and fear that clung to him like a second skin. She didn't show it, but Alex could see the weight of their mission in her eyes, the burden of knowing that she was training someone who was, in many ways, still a stranger to this world. He wasn't like her, wasn't like the warriors who had been born and bred for battle. But somehow, she believed in him. She believed that he could be more, that he could rise to meet the expectations of a war he didn't understand. Late one evening, after an especially brutal training session, Alex sat alone in one of the ship's observation decks, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The stars seemed to stretch on forever, distant pinpricks of light in the inky blackness. He had never felt so small, so insignificant. Back on Earth, he had been a part of something simple, something that made sense. But here, In this alien vessel, with a war looming on the horizon, he felt as though he had lost his place in the universe entirely. He was no longer just Alex, the guy who loved space and dreamed of adventure. He was someone else now, someone who had been chosen for a purpose he didn't fully understand. A soft sound broke his reverie, and he turned to see Xalira approaching him. Her presence was commanding, yet there was a subtle shift in her demeanor tonight, something less rigid, less focused on the mission, and more attuned to him. She had a way of sensing when he was at his breaking point, and somehow she always seemed to know exactly when to step in. "You're improving," she said quietly, her tone uncharacteristically gentle. Alex didn't answer immediately, his gaze returning to the stars. He didn't feel improved, didn't feel like he was getting any closer to the person Xalira wanted him to be. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this," he admitted, his voice low, almost drowned out by the hum of the ship. "I'm not like you, Xalira. I'm not a warrior. I don't know what I'm doing." She stepped closer, standing beside him, as they both looked out at the stars. For a moment, there was silence, just the vastness of space and the quiet sound of the ship's pulse. Finally, she spoke. "You're wrong," she said, her voice firm, but there was an underlying warmth to it. "You may not be like me, Alex, but you are human, and that, above all else, is your strength." He glanced at her, surprised by the softness in her voice. He had come to expect the sharp, no-nonsense approach that she took with everything. But this felt different. It felt like she was seeing him, truly seeing him, not as a tool for the war, not as a pawn in a game he didn't understand, but as something more. "You are part of a lineage, a bloodline that has been chosen for this purpose," Xalira continued. "But you are also more than that. You are a person, Alex, a person with the power to make choices, to change the course of things. You are not a puppet in this war. You are its future." Alex swallowed hard. The weight of her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that he had some kind of control over what was happening, over the war that was coming. But the doubt still lingered, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. "I'm not sure I can do this," he whispered. "You will," she said simply, her eyes meeting his with a look of fierce determination. "Because you have no choice. This is your fate, Alex, and together we will fight. Together we will stand against the enemy." Her words hung in the air, and Alex felt the truth in them, even if he wasn't ready to fully accept it yet. There was something about her confidence, her belief in him, that gave him a glimmer of hope, however small. He wasn't sure he was ready to fight in a war that spanned the stars, but one thing was clear: he wasn't alone. Xalira had brought him here, had trained him, and though the future was uncertain, they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to give him the strength to move forward. The tension on the ship had been building for days. It wasn't just the constant hum of the engines or the endless hours of training that weighed heavily on Alex's shoulders. It was something more. A dark presence had begun to seep into every corner of the vessel, a foreboding sensation that made his skin crawl. Xalira had been more distant lately, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a quiet urgency that Alex couldn't ignore. The war was no longer some distant concept. It was here, closing in on them like a storm, and it wasn't waiting for anyone to be ready. Alex had tried to push his fears aside, to focus on what Xalira had been teaching him, but it was hard to concentrate when every day brought them closer to the inevitable confrontation. He had grown stronger, more skilled, but even with all the training, he didn't feel prepared. The enemy Xalira had warned him about, the forces that threatened not just their people, but the entire galaxy, were not something he could fight with a few weeks of training. They were a force of destruction, relentless and merciless. It was late one evening when the alarms blared, cutting through the quiet of the ship like a knife. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he bolted upright from his bed, panic flooding his senses. The emergency lights flickered, casting an eerie red glow across the walls of his quarters. Without thinking, he grabbed his gear and rushed toward the command center. He knew what this meant. The enemy was here. Xalira was already there, her eyes scanning the ship's display screens with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She turned to him as he entered, her expression as unreadable as ever, but there was a flicker of something Alex couldn't quite place, in her gaze. "This is it," she said quietly, her voice steady, but filled with an unmistakable weight. "They found us. We fight now." Alex's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he felt the ground shift beneath him, the weight of the words settling over him like a ton of bricks. He had known this day would come, but he hadn't been ready for it. He wasn't ready to face the enemy who had been hunting them for so long, the ones who sought to destroy everything Xalira and her people had fought for. He had trained for this, but no amount of preparation could make him feel like he was truly ready. "You don't have to do this," Xalira said, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that took him by surprise. "If you're not ready, you don't have to fight. We can still find another way." Alex stared at her, his heart racing. He could see the doubt in her eyes, the uncertainty she had never shown before. She was a warrior, trained to face this kind of fight. But for the first time, he realized that this wasn't just a battle for her, it was a personal one. This was her home, her people, and everything she had ever known was at stake. He wasn't the only one who was afraid. "No," Alex said, shaking his head. "I've come this far. I'm in this, Xalira. We do this together." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the air was thick, but there was something else now, something unspoken, a bond between them that had been forged in the fires of training and survival. Xalira nodded, her expression softening just the slightest bit. "Then let's make sure we survive," she said, turning toward the ship's command console. "Prepare yourself. It's time." The ship's interior was alive with motion as the crew went into high alert. The walls buzzed with the sound of systems coming online, and Alex could feel the change in the air as the ship prepared for battle. He followed Xalira to the main weapons bay, where a group of warriors was already assembling. They were all different, alien species from distant worlds, each one with a story and a purpose. But now, they were all united for the same reason: survival. Alex felt a strange sense of calm wash over him as he stood alongside them. He wasn't one of them. Not really, but for the first time, he felt like he belonged. His training had prepared him, but it was more than that. It was the knowledge that he wasn't alone. Xalira was by his side, and the warriors who stood with him had fought battles like this before. They knew what was at stake. The ship shook as the enemy made their move, a violent jolt that sent Alex's heart racing. Alarms screamed through the air, and the lights flickered once more. Xalira barked orders, and the warriors moved swiftly, their movements sharp and precise. Alex followed their lead, feeling the weight of his weapon in his hands, the power of it almost foreign to him. He had only learned to use it in the past few weeks, but now it felt natural, as if it were part of him. The enemy ship loomed outside the viewport, a monstrous black silhouette against the stars. Alex could feel the heat of it through the walls, the immense power it radiated. This was no ordinary ship. It was a weapon, built for destruction, and it was coming for them. "We've trained for this moment," Xalira said, her voice steady in his ear as she moved beside him. "Now we fight." The doors to the bay opened, and they were thrust into the chaos of the battle. The enemy forces were swift, descending on them with terrifying precision. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline surging through his veins as he raised his weapon. It was real now. There was no turning back. He fought with everything he had, every lesson, every moment of doubt and fear he had felt in the past weeks. His body moved on instinct, the training Xalira had put him through guiding his every motion. His hands were steady, his aim true, and as he fired, he saw the impact on the enemy. each shot landing with a satisfying burst of energy. But there was no time to savor the victory. The battle raged on, relentless and unforgiving. The ship shuddered again, this time with a deafening force. Alex staggered, the floor beneath him buckling as explosions rocked the hull. He looked up to see Xalira moving ahead, her every movement a blur of grace and lethal precision. She was a warrior in her element, but even she couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. "Get to the bridge," she shouted over the chaos. "We need to disable their ship before it's too late." Alex nodded, his pulse racing as he sprinted after her. The corridors were a maze of flashing lights and smoke, and he could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the walls. But they had a mission. The bridge was their only chance to end this, to ensure their survival. They reached the bridge, where the final confrontation awaited. The enemy ship's forces were here too, a sea of armored warriors blocking their way. But Alex didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon, his heart pounding, his breath shallow. This was it, the moment he had been trained for, the moment that would decide everything. Xalira stood beside him, her eyes fierce, her expression unreadable. "Ready?" she asked, her voice quiet but strong. Alex glanced at her, seeing the same determination in her eyes that he had seen from the very beginning. They were in this together, and for the first time since all of this had started, Alex knew he was ready. "We fight," he said, his voice steady. And with that, they charged into the fray, determined to do whatever it took to save their worlds.